streams of activity. So HR is one of them. Strategy, strategic planning, forward thinking is another one, and board governance. With a multitude of years of experience, I never say how many because we're all extremely young and we will continue to be so because I maintain I'm going backwards, I'm not going forward. Janet really has that depth of experience. So when she's going to be sharing thoughts, ideas, concepts, leading us in discussion, it's not just pure HR principles. It is that breadth of experience that only comes with having tackled many, many issues in many, many environments. So don't be shy. Just keep probing, keep taking everything that she has in terms of knowledge. And she's got a new team member that I'm sure she will introduce, so I will leave that to you, Janet. And Salopek and Associates in 2015 launched a very specialized offering, and that is an HR program for not-for-profits. Don't be shy about asking her at break what that means. We live in a world that is very different as not-for-profits, but we still have to give 100% to people and people leadership. And so any tool that is available should be absolutely explored. And David, I can't begin to tell you how curious I am about Capacity Building 3.0 because you're right. It has to be that forward thinking. So Jackie, without any further ado, I'm opening it to you if you have anything else to say. If not, well, there you go. I mean, you know, we're all in family, so I don't see why not.
I think we need to hand off to Janet.
All right, so off we go without any delay. Janet, the floor is yours, and walk us through what it means to be living with 5 generations at work and leading them.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you for those kind words. Nicole and I have worked together for a long time, and it's been a bit of a journey and a very pleasurable journey. I really enjoy working with Jackie at CCVO and Nicole at Talent Pool. So thank you for providing me with the opportunity to come tomorrow and actually to talk about a subject that I could talk for hours on. There is no time than this time to be in my profession. It's exciting. We are changing programs, processes, the way we do business daily. Things are constantly changing, and it's just never the same. And so it's pretty exciting. So I'm excited to be here to talk to you about workforce change, about the demographics. And I loved your point, David, about we all be thinking outwards, right? So I'm gonna present with you today some trends. And whether you're seeing those trends happening today, I'd like us just to be mindful that even if you're not seeing them today, they're coming. So let's talk about how do we get prepared, even though we may not be seeing it today, but without a doubt, the research tells us that things are changing and are going to continue to change. So how do we get ready for that from a people perspective? So we're here to talk today primarily and focus on our workforce. So Jackie's gonna, I do want to introduce Syra. Syra's a new member to our team. She's a senior consultant that has joined us today. And Syra, thank you for coming out to the session. Can I go back to the agenda? Yeah. So you can see from the agenda that it's not going to be all about me talking today. I want to share with you some information, and based on that information, hopefully we'll have good dialogue. And then the last half of the workshop, we're actually going to work 2 case studies. And I'm going a little bit on a risk here because I'm going to ask you guys to give us input for the case studies, and we're going to have a look at that input early in the morning, and then we're going to bring the case studies to you later this afternoon. So I'm going to ask Syra and Nicole to sort of help define those case studies as we work through the early part of the session today to make sure that we're relevant today, right? Whatever we do, we want to make sure we're relevant. So I thought that that's the best way to keep our topic meaningful and relevant. So we are going to talk about just a little bit more about the agenda. We're going to talk about demographics. I'm going to share with you some trends. There was a study that I want to bring to you, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about managing and managing change, and what, if anything, has happened, and is there anything different there with respect to managing change. And then we're going to have a bit of a break, and then we're going to get practical. We're going to do the case study for the last hour of the session. And then I've got a little bit of a work plan, because I always believe when we come together like this, we want to be able to think about, what have I learned today from discussions that I can take back to my workplace? And so I want you to spend a little bit of time on a work plan, and then we'll leave here no later than noon, because we all have got parking, and we have to make sure we get to our cars before our meters run out. So we'll be out of here with our wrap-up by noontime. Okay, thanks, Jackie. So as Nicole mentioned, a lot of our change that's happening right now in the workplace has to do with who is in our workplace. And we got up to five generations in the workplace. And if you're not experiencing 5 generations in the workplace, it will come. So you eventually need to get ready for the fact that you're going to have quite a diverse age demographic in your workplace. So what does that mean, and how do we get ready for that? Baby boomers are postponing retirement, and what I also found in my readings and getting prepared to this, women, there was a study out of the States that basically said a lot of women are actually exiting the workforce and are becoming consultants. And I thought that was a really interesting finding in this particular study that came out of the States. But what we do know for sure is that as our baby boomers, people who are in my age group are actually leaving, and they are deciding to consult, and they're coming back into our workforce. So we actually are seeing them staying, but staying in a different capacity. Many of them coming back as consultants. And so what does that mean and look like for our workforce? Millennials and baby boomers are going to make up the most mix as far as our workforce goes. So you've got a lot of the millennials coming in, and the millennials are changing the way we do our business. They have a huge impact. And so we need to really embrace that generation and say, how can we leverage that group to make things really cook in our organizations, because they are very, very impactful. We've got cultural diverse, but we've also got gender diverse. So gender diverse, we usually think about male-female, right? But we've got more than just male-female. We've got the gay prospect, lesbians. We've got all of that, right? People that we really need to embrace, and we need to embrace that gender diversity more than just, it's not just a male and female. And what does that mean? As we bring people in, we work with them and make sure that we honor them and who they are. So that's the cultural diversity that's coming into our workforce, and our gender diversity. We've got tenure is shorter. We don't have lifers in our workforce anymore. So we've got people that are staying for shorter periods of time. They're getting experience in your organization, and then they're moving on. So you don't have, if you can keep people in your workforce for 2 years, you're doing a great job, because you don't see people with 5 years, 10 years like we did way back in the day. So you've got people that are here for a short time. How do we embrace that, and how do we create an opportunity for that? And then we've got contract versus regular employment. So again, the trend being you've got people that are contracted as opposed to brought on as an employee. And again, how is that impacting us? And again, how do we take that and embrace that and make that an opportunity rather than a challenge? So those some of the changes that we're seeing in the workplace. Any thoughts on what we're seeing here? And do you see anything different? Do you see anything that you might want to add to this list? What are your thoughts?
So if some of these more senior folks are leaving to do consultancies, and tenure is shorter, are we just seeing a loss of organizational memory and the ability to sustain if you're losing that?
Well, that's the risk, because you're basically, your employees are transitioning into potentially a contract consultant position as opposed to a regular employee. But what is it that we need to do in order to make sure that doesn't happen? What do we need to be doing? Succession planning, what else? Coaching and mentoring, right? So what's the opportunity there, right? So if you know this is a trend, and it is, that's what the research tells us, then what we need to be doing as organizations is thinking about our coaching and mentoring programs within our organization. Because we know if you've got a lot of baby boomers, that's what they're going to want to do. So how can you foster the development of some of your millennials to make sure you don't lose that history? And paying attention to those baby boomers who want to maybe, like, be in front of them, right? Put that elephant out on the table and have that conversation. If you know this is a trend and you got a lot of baby boomers, you need to be putting that out on the table and talking to them about it. Is this something that they want? Would this be good for them? Why do you have to have that conversation with them? Why do you have to be upfront with that conversation? Why do you have to put that elephant out on the table and actually maybe force that conversation? Why is that good?
So they get excited about the opportunity or their buy-in.
That's right, and you're not blindsided, right? Like, if you don't talk about it, you're going to be blindsided, right? So don't be afraid to have those conversations. So when you look through this list, if you think, and we know that these could be trends hitting us, create a plan to have the conversation. The gender diverse one is a difficult conversation to have, right? How many of us really want to have that conversation? But how many here in this room think that this could be something that's impacting them or actually will impact them? Put up your hand. Yeah. I'm a baby boomer. I find it hard having these conversations, right? But I got to be courageous. I got to put it out on the table. I've got to find a way to talk about it, right? Because it's not here, it's coming, and it's going to affect your people. Whether that's your clients, whether that's your volunteers, or whether that's your people. So we need to be thinking about how can we have these conversations. Okay, do you want to? Thank you. So let's just talk a minute about the 5 generations in the workplace. I mean, we could have a whole workshop just on what each of these groups bring to our organizations, and we don't have time for that. But we can very, very quickly acknowledge the fact that each one of these groupings are different, are very, very different. And why are they different? Why are they different? They were brought up differently, exactly. The way that I brought up my children is very, very different than the way my parents brought up me. And as a result, I'm sort of hardwired for certain things then, and I expect certain things when I come into the workplace. Very different from what my children expect. My children were coached, they had after-school programs, they were always in a program, highly supervised, and they always got lots and lots of feedback because their coaches were always giving them feedback. Their after-school programs were always giving them feedback. You're a great kid, you do great things. You know, they were always being reinforced by people that looked after them when I was working or when my husband was working. So what do they expect when they come into the workplace? Feedback. Oh my gosh. And if they don't get feedback, they struggle, right? So each one of these generations have expectations when they come in. And I don't think we even understand Generation Z yet. And they're a-coming, and they tell us they look very, very different from our millennials. How many of you guys have got Generation Zs in your workforce right now? What are you seeing? What's characteristic? What do they look like?
Incredibly young, they're really eager.
Yeah.
For and just learning new things. They're really into the opportunities to learn and
Right.
very energetic and enthusiastic about it.
Perfect. What else do you see with Generation Z? You know, it's unfortunate millennials get a little bit of a bad rap sometimes, right? I work with a pile of millennials and I love them. I love them to death. But you need to know what excites them. And yeah, they are go-getters. Forget the corporate ladder, and if they want something, they go to the top. And yeah, they are exciting though, right? But yeah, mentorship, I'm not so sure a 70-year-old's really going to be a good mentor for me. Like, not sure that's going to be a good match. So, you know, again, that's being aware and planning and saying, okay, what turns them on, what's going to be good for them, understanding where they are, where they came from, so that you can make sure your programs and your processes within your organization to support these people are relevant for those, right? So yeah, the Generation Zs are going to be all over those coaching and mentoring of your people that might be leaving or coming back as consultants, but maybe not so much with your millennials. So how do you work within that, right? Great challenges for us though, right? Keeps us on our toes. Never a dull day. Never a dull day, right? Okay, thank you. So what are some of the impacts? And I really think with respect to our workforce, it is the demographic that is changing our workforce and the challenges and opportunities that creates for us at work, right? Or with our volunteer groups, right? Because it's not just about your employees, it's also about your volunteers. So this is a wider discussion. It's your people. So it's your volunteers, it's your employees, right? But I really believe it is the demographic to a large extent that's creating a lot of the change with respect to our workforce, right? And it's just because of what the diversity that grouping brings to our organization. So of course, one size does not fit all. And you know, back in the day, like I'm thinking even, I'm older. So back in the day, like 10 years ago, right, we strived for one size fits all. It was one policy manual. It was you administered it to those policies. And it was all about fair and consistent. That is so not what it is today, right? Fair, definitely, but consistency, no, because one size doesn't fit all, right? And it's just because we got a complex world. Our people live in a complex world. When they show up for work in the morning, they are dealing with whatever happened, you know, because they, as they raise their families, are living in a complex world. So we have to be so tuned to the fact when they come into work for us, it's different. We don't know what they've faced when they got up in the morning, right? With their children, with their spouse, with their partner. And so we really need to understand then that we have to be able to listen, to see, to build relationships with our people so we can make their work relevant based on what they're facing in their world outside of work, right? So it's that challenge and constantly saying, so what does that look like, right? And helping then to educate everybody within the organization as to why one size does not fit all. Because who in your organization thinks one size should fit all? It's your traditionalist, right? It's your baby boomers. I have to constantly be reminded, Janet, one size does not fit all. It's not a good thing, you know? And so it's really important then that we constantly, as we're working with our workforce, developing our people and programs and processes relative to our people, that we keep that in mind. Still being fair though, right? So we are very much more guidance-driven as opposed to rule-driven, right? So we work with organizations that come to us and say, we don't want a policy and procedure manual. We don't want one. Do we need one? Okay, well, I got to really think about that, right? Because I'm working with an organization right now. I work directly with the CEO. It's not in the not-for-profit sector, but it could be. And he said, Janet, no policy and procedure manual. Don't want it. And if you think that that's going to be good for our organizations, well, it just isn't. Okay, well, I've worked with him now for 8 years. And he has a form of a policy and procedure manual. He's got some guidelines because he's growing his business. He grew it, his recession hit, he downsized, and now he's growing again. And you can't do all of that without guidelines. So he has even said, you know what, I don't need a policy and procedure manual, but I do need some guidelines, and guidelines are good. So what does that look like, right? and making it fit for our culture and our organization, right? So no, they don't have a big policy and procedure manual, but they do have guidelines. They've got a handbook, they've got some guidelines, but it looks and feels differently, right? Communication is critical. This is a key competency that when we're bringing in leaders to our organization and we're developing leaders, we so need to be developing them on communication. Because if we're not effective communications, we are going to miss opportunities. So communication is key. Transparency is required. I mean, because if you've got 5 generations in the workforce, and at least one of them, your millennials, who are making up half of the workforce right now, they want it, they expect it, and if they don't get it, they'll leave. So whatever you do, you've got to be transparent, right? So back in the day, salaries, scales, discussions around compensations, they were confidential, they were private. I still think your own personal salary is confidential. Call me a dinosaur, I don't care. But I still believe that that is a confidential conversation between me and an employee, right? But I'll have to tell you, millennials don't tend to agree, they share. They share. They know what everybody's making, right? So even within our own organizations, we are transparent when we go out and work on a job. If you're working at a senior level, this is what you're getting, right? So because, you know, you might as well put it all out there because it's going to be talked about at the coffee shop or the office cooler. So put that elephant out, right? I still want to say, though, if you're having a conversation with an employee about their compensation, do it behind doors. I still believe that's important, and that's a value that I have, and that's something that even as I work with the millennials who I work with, I still say, you know what, your individual comp is still, in my opinion, a confidential conversation, right? But the amount of information we share around compensation has completely changed than where it was even 5 years ago because they need to know information. So as you think about your comp programs, as you think about your salary scales, find a way to be transparent. Don't hide it. Because if you want to keep these millennials, you need to think about a way you can be more transparent. How can you also be more flexible? We also know our millennials want lots of flexibility. They want to work away from the office. They want to be able to work from home. They make up half of our workforce. So what are we doing to prepare for that if we haven't already done it, right? And many organizations I work with say, you know what, it doesn't work for us to be flexible in our workplace because we've got clients that are coming in here and they need to be serviced 9 to 5, like they're coming in. I hear that. But you also have half of your workforce that says, I can find a way to service my clients without having sitting at my desk 9 to 5. You need to pay attention to that. You need to do some brainstorming around that because this is an important group. They constitute 50% of your workforce. And if you don't find a way, you're going to lose some really good people. So it's opening up that box and thinking about how can I work differently? And our managers need to be taught. I mean, I listened to CBC one day as I was coming in to the to work, and it was about a manager at a retail store in Ontario, and she had denied somebody some time off who was having a medical issue. I mean, it just blew up. They ended up on the front page, and I actually was interviewed by CBC to respond to that, and I said, how sad is that? Whose fault is that? That company ended up on the front page. Whose fault was that? Was that the manager's fault? Was that the manager's fault? No. It was the organization's fault. They never taught that manager the legislation around disability, around sick time, and when somebody is sick, how do you need to treat them? So they ended up on the front page, very damaging to their brand, because they didn't teach their managers. And I'll tell you, millennials know their rights. They know their entitlements. They know. They know. And so bad on them, not bad on the manager, bad on them that they didn't proactively teach their leaders, teach their managers to pay attention to the rights of our people. And so this managing and teaching and leadership development, so critical and key in our workforce today. Okay, Jackie. The other thing that I just want to think about, because of the diversity in our workplace, And I would say if we go back to that list, and I'm thinking because of probably culturally, gender diversity in particular, and also I'd say the 5 generations in the workplace, we are seeing a lot of investigations happening. So you're getting complaints, right? And so in our organizations, we do quite a few investigations, which is sad. Like, we're busy on investigations because our workforce knows their rights and they're not putting up with it. So if you're struggling with, diversity in your culture, your gender, and or different workforces, all of those groupings, I would like to suggest, have a different idea as to what respect looks like in the workplace, right? So if you're not talking to your leaders and your managers about that, you're missing an opportunity and you're creating a risk for yourselves, right? So this respect in the workplace is huge, and it's a trend that we're seeing, and you need to think about what are you doing to have those conversations with your managers and your supervisors so they're ready, they're prepared, and they are being respectful. They may think they're being respectful, but if they're a baby boomer or a traditional, their idea of respect is very, very different from your millennials and your Generation Zs, I'd like to suggest. So the number of harassment and bullying claims are definitely on the rise. And I would like to suggest that this, honestly, if you think about it, is an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to get out in front of this, to do some good education in your organizations. And I'd like to suggest that it's with not only your managers and your supervisors, but it's also with your employees, right? Help them understand what respect looks like. Pull that slide up on here. If you guys want this presentation, you can use it, you can have it, to put and use it in your own organizations to force the conversations, like to put that elephant out in the room, right? And just talk to them about the diversity and how that impacts respect, what that looks like with respect to respect. And do some education then around what harassment looks like, what bullying looks like, because depending on who we are and what we bring to the workplace with respect to our own background, that could look and feel differently depending on the different people you have in your workforce. And again, millennials make it their business to understand the legislation, to know their rights, and to make the very, very most out of their workforce experience. So that's why it's important to have these conversations with your people. Okay. So there was a survey published by Bamboo HR, and actually I thank Nicole for bringing this to my attention. And I just wanted to share with you some trends that came out of this study. And if you want to look this study up, you can Google it. But we'll just sort of advance through and quickly go through some of the trends, which we've already talked about in some cases, and in other cases, I'd like to talk about them now. So the 6 trends that this article pointed to were organizations are going social, benefits are a la carte, feedback is becoming fluid, so you're not seeing those performance annual, the emphasis on the annual performance review. Technology is moving into our offices and to beyond our offices. Career development is becoming agile and gig-focused, which we'll talk about each one of these points. And analytics are changing the game. So let's just really quickly go through each one of these. Jackie, I'll just get you. So what is about organizations are going social? So this is all about social media. And so, 10 years ago, back in the day, you would see that 2/3 of our employees use technology to block connections to banned sites. So it was always about developing policies and procedures, so you sort of handcuffed your employees, right? What you can and cannot see. And 3 out of 4 organizations monitored the websites, so it was all about control. And more than half of the surveyed employers monitored employees' emails. So today, it's different. It's changing. And what we're seeing now is that 30% of organizations now only block access, right? So what you're seeing is a trend that employers are saying, you know what? I certainly don't want my employees looking at inappropriate sites. That's a given, right? That's an education we have to do. But to make a hard and rule, fast rule about you can't do this and you can't do that, why are we moving away from that? Why do you think? We are actually benefiting from the fact that many of our employees are on their personal devices. because they're communicating, they're getting information, they're accessing information. So if we create too many hard and fasts about that, we're losing opportunity. So it's that gray space, right? How do we make sure they're being appropriate and that they're just not checking their mail messages and that they're doing their work, but it's managing that. And so many organizations, and this is going to be the trend, and that's going to be your challenge, to say, how do I go beyond making those hard, fast rules about what you can and can't do on social media, but still making sure that the job is getting done and people are being appropriate. Okay, we'll just advance. Benefits are going a la carte, and all I want to say here is that, and many of you have probably seen that, because you're going to have, or you do have, 5 generations in the workplace, benefits mean different things to different people depending on their ages, right? So the benefits that are important to me as a baby boomer are very, very different probably than Syra, right? And even for the Generation Z, right? Retirement planning, my God, like I don't think your Gen Zs and even many of your millennials are really too concerned right now, rightly or wrongly so, about retirement. So, you know, you've got to sort of figure out what's important to who you have in your workforce or who you will bring into your workforce. Because as David said this morning, it's about looking out, right? Don't just look at what's happening today. Look out. These are trends. You may see them now, but if you're not seeing them now, they are coming, right? So what are you doing to make sure that your benefit programs can be relevant for all those 5 generations in your workplace? Because relevancy is the key. If you want to attract and keep them, they got to be relevant. Okay, Jackie, we'll just move forward. Feedback is becoming fluid. So this goes back to the fact that, particularly for our millennials, right? They want feedback. They need feedback. They thrive on feedback. The annual review doesn't cut it for them. They see it as a joke, actually. So what are we doing to make sure that our performance program then is relevant to them and is actually exciting them rather than turning them off, right? And so really where performance management is going right now is how do we build a process and teach our managers to give feedback in the moment, to give it to them regularly. Don't wait for that annual review. And what does that look like with respect to documentation? Because that's also important, right? And a process. So the world of performance management has completely changed. And it is definitely one size does not fit all. And we don't even go in many cases, as consultants, with a here's a plan sort of thing. It's sitting down and talking about your culture, what works well for your managers, and honestly, just talking to your leaders about feedback. How do they give it? What do they look like? What's documentation look like? Because many of you are accredited, right? Like you have to do performance reviews, right? It's not as if it's, oh yeah, well we don't do annual reviews anymore. Well, you're not going to be accredited then, right? So what process can you develop that makes it relevant, that still allows you to do performance management, because you do need to be accredited, but it makes sense for your people, right? So what does that look like? So again, completely changing and less formal. 55% of millennials would feel more confident in their current position if they had more frequent conversations with their managers. Pretty powerful. We love it. Bring it on. When's my review? They like it. They like it. Okay, Jackie. Thank you. Technology is moving work beyond the office. I think we all understand this. The problem is we probably all understand it, but how the heck do we do it, right? It sounds great, but you know, there's firewalls, there's confidentiality, how do we do that? I don't have the golden bullet. I don't have the golden nugget to say this is how you do it, but guess who does know how to do this? Pardon? Your people, yes. Your people. Your people know how to do this. They're pretty sharp. So get them in a room, talk to them about it, what it's going to look like. Talk to them about the risk. Help them understand, and then work with them on a solution. That's the way you find your way on this one. Because if somebody asked me to figure this one out, I'd be working on it forever, and I don't think I'd come up with the greatest solution. But I know if I bring my millennials in, they'll figure it out for me, and we'll develop some parameters around it. Okay, Jackie, we'll just move forward. So career development is agile and gig-focused. So in this article, I thought gig-focused, what does that mean? And so it's basically what it's saying is that the short stint turns people on, right? So especially your millennials, right? So give them those little bursts of opportunities to learn, to take on a special project, to learn as they're working. They're not so keen, they're not so fussed about climbing the corporate ladder. They just want to learn every day they come to work, right? So creating those opportunities for them is really, really important. Whatever that looks like in your organization, but moving away for, well, they're the most senior person on our team, so they really should get that opportunity. No, maybe, maybe not. Maybe it should be that new person that you've just hired that's crackerjack, really excited. Maybe it's that person, not that other person that, you know, has been with us for a long time, just because I want to respect the fact that they've got seniority. We have to, you know, and we have to do both, right? Like, we have to respect those people that have been around for a long time, and yes, give them opportunity too. But we so also need to make it work for other people who are really interested in bursts of opportunities. And maybe it's a burst of opportunity outside your organization that you can put them on a committee and whatever that looks like, right? And again, thinking, how do I do that? Well, think outside of just a regular employee, because you've got people in your workforce now that love contracts. They love the idea of being able to put, they're not afraid of a 1-year contract. That's opportunity. Back in my day, I got 1-year opportunity. I'm out of a job in a year. I got kids to feed. How's that going to work for me, right? That's what I think. But you bring your Generation Z and your millennials, they go, sign me up for a 1-year contract. I can do a 1-year contract. I'd learn so much on that 1-year contract. And then I'm going to take what I've learned on that 1-year contract, and I'm going to grow my career. They're not afraid of those 1-year contracts, right? So it just changes everything, right? It just so changes it. Okay, we'll just advance forward. Thanks, Nicole. So we know analytics, how many times have we talked about measurements? We know we have to measure. Unfortunately, though, we're not particularly good at it. And we've talked about measurement for so long, our funders expect it, right? Like, we're not getting funding if we're not trying to measure, right? So what the statistics tell us, though, is that today, 32% of organizations say they're ready to begin using predictive analytics. That's pretty low. But it's coming. It's coming. So we got to continually get better at this, right? Because it is a trend. It's not going away. And we have to develop competencies within our organization or outside of organizations that can help us with this. But just saying, oh, this is a trend, it will go away, no. This trend has been here for a while. We just haven't been really great at getting our competency built up because we struggle on how to do this. We're getting better because now 32% of organizations say they're ready to do it, but we have to continually find our way with respect to analytics. And every time we develop a people program or process, what do we need to be asking ourselves? What do we need to be asking ourselves? How do I measure it? How do I measure it, right? If you got a people program process, you need to be asking that question. Okay, Jackie, thank you. We'll just move ahead. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, in your handout, you've got a piece of paper that asks you, what is one challenge that you are currently facing in the workplace that you would like input and or help in solving? The context is your workforce, right? That's what we're here talking about, right? Your context is your workforce. So what challenge are you having with the workforce that you would love to work with this group for an hour on? And what we're going to do is, Cyra's going to help me here, and Nicole, you're going to help me as well. They're going to go away from your feedback and work this over the next half hour. And after the break, we're going to come back and we're going to work this scenario. And we're going to have 2 scenarios. So give some good thought. But we can't think forever because we're in a half-day workshop. But just think about what might be a challenge that would be a really good topic to work in a group setting. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes and jot that down, and then I'll get Cyra to collect them. Thank you. Can you, Cyra? I'm thinking too, what might be a challenge? Well, I think I think one challenge might be, and I'll give you a chance to think because you might want to add to this one. I often hear is that, you know, the baby boomers, the traditionalists, right, they're struggling with change in our organization, right? It's hitting them so hard, right? And how do we address that? Because there's, as somebody mentioned, I think you mentioned this one, like, there's a whole wealth of information there within that group, right? We don't want to lose that within our organization. But honestly, they need to sometimes you feel, well, they just need to get over themselves, right? Like, how do we do this, right? But you still want to respect the fact that they have so much to offer the organization. So how do you manage that, right? It's nice to say, okay, this is what we can do, but really, how do you manage that? To respect and honor what they bring and leverage what they bring, yet move on. Like, move on, because unfortunately, some of them drag us down. They have lots to offer, our traditionalists, our baby boomers, but if they can't keep up with the pace and they struggle with the pace, it can be a burden. It can be a real burden, especially to your millennials and your Generation Z, right? So what happens is we end up actually losing sometimes good people out of both groups. It's because we haven't found a way to manage that. So what do you think, Syra? The courage, those the courageous conversations. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
But also, like, we know that we need to do, knowledge transfer, but how do you actually do that in an organization? What
Right.
does that actually look like? Because you can't just say, we need you to transfer knowledge, now go figure
Yeah,
out
exactly.
provide some infrastructure to do that, right?
Okay, thanks for that, Cyrus. So hopefully that will help you as you think about your challenges. I'll give you a couple more minutes, and then I'll get you to collect them, Syra. Okay, so I think we're good then. So what I'm going to do is we're going to keep going till 10:15, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to work the scenarios after. So if I can just, so thank you for your feedback. I wanted to share with you, I found an article. I go to Forbes quite a bit, actually, when I'm Googling and looking for things. And I thought, you know what, I've asked you guys to come up with your challenges. And then I thought, I wonder if I Google this, what am I going to find out with research that says, what are your biggest challenges? And can we relate that back to the workforce? So I did that, and here's what I came up with as far as my research in the Forbes article. And it came from the Forbes Nonprofit Council, which is a group of not-for-profit leaders. And I think there was 5 or 6 of them that were interviewed, and here's what they said with respect to their challenges. So we'll just advance it forward. So there were 4, and these were the top 4 challenges that they identified. Again, it's American slanted, but I do think there's good food for thought. And I like to think about this because this also speaks to, if you're not seeing it now, it's coming. So I thought it would stretch us a little bit to think about our challenges. And so one of the challenges was being comfortable receiving help. And again, embracing our board to say, if you're a leader of the organization, I really don't have all the answers. And I have a great board here. I really need to understand what they bring to the table, what are their competencies, and I need to leverage them, their knowledge, but also who they know in the community so I can get help. And so that was one of the challenges, which I thought was interesting. And actually, I've seen that as I've worked with some not-for-profits at both the board and management level. And sometimes we feel vulnerable to say, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm having problems. I'm having challenges, right? Because sometimes in a leader, it can be kind of lonely, and we don't know whether we can really trust our board to open up and saying, I need help. I need help, right? So how do we do that? And it was interesting to see that as one of the challenges of these top 5 leaders in this article. Balancing innovation and productivity. Which was interesting because I saw this sort of we need to be leading edge. We need to always be thinking out there, outside the box. We always need to be thinking ahead. But what's the reality of our world? You're in the weeds. You got clients coming in the door. People that need to be served. People that it's hard to say no to, even though it may not fit your mandate. So, oh yeah, it's easy to say, yeah, we need to be out there thinking, doing. Our funders want us to do all of these things. But the reality is we got a job to do and we got people to serve. And sometimes it doesn't always fit our mandate, and then what do we do, right? So how do we balance that? And so I thought that was interesting that that was named as one of the challenges. So when we're thinking of these challenges, what I'd like you to do, and as we move into the rest of the morning, think about how does this impact your workforce, and how can you leverage your workforce to deal with some of these challenges, either the ones that you've identified or even some of the challenges that you're seeing on this list here. How do you leverage your workforce to manage some of these challenges? Another challenge that these 5 leaders, I think it was 5 leaders actually that were interviewed, having inconclusive deadlines and dealing with mission creep. And so, you know, they've got a mandate and they've got a strategic plan, yet they are asked and are required to service outside of that, right? And so how do they say no? And what does that look like with respect to their funding even, right? So, and not only their funding, but also their workforce. You hire people to do a certain job, and then all of a sudden the landscape changes, and you're moving off in a different direction, or you're asked to do a different program. How is that, how do I deal with all of that, right? And what implication does that have for my workforce, right? So thinking about that as a challenge was one of the items raised in this article. And then the last one was working with a complex model. So, you know, it's not simple. We've got 5 generations in the workplace. We've got diversity. We've got a lot of things coming at us. We have just got a global world. It's no longer local. It's no longer provincial. It's global. It's global, right? So we got to be thinking big all the time. It's just not simple. So figuring out how do we motivate and engage our people when it's not simple, when it's not just Calgary, when it's not just, even though we may service a client in Calgary, I'd like to think global affects our business, what we do, how we serve, even though we might just serve Calgary, right? It's because it's a wide, with the internet, it's just so big now, right? With respect to what comes at us, the information that comes at us, it is a global world, right? Which makes it more complex. And how do we motivate and encourage and do that when even our mandate may be local, right? So it's complex, it's not easy. So moving forward. So, and the fifth, no, there was 5. And the 5th challenge that these leaders said was being coachable. So this was the opinion of the article, not necessarily my opinion, but what the article was saying that typically, in the opinion of these 5 people, leaders in our sector, they are unique, but they can sometimes be quite stubborn about the mission that they serve. And they're, for all the right reasons, they're dedicated, they're passionate, right? But because of that passion, because of that dedication, sometimes it's hard for them to be open to other ways of thinking, open to coaching, right? Because they see it a certain way, right? So this, they identified, was a challenge. And a challenge they'd like to put out there as a not-for-profit leader must be humble enough to accept the fact that I need feedback. I need constructive feedback. I, as a leader of an organization, need to be asking my board for a process to give me feedback. What is it? I want to embrace it. I want to get better, right? So this was raised as a challenge because according to this article, or the way I interpret it is, some of our leaders say, okay, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If I'm not getting feedback, I'm pretty sure things are good. But that may not be the case, right? That may not be the case. So again, have the courage to put that elephant out on the table and look for a process so you make sure you get good feedback. So I thought that was an interesting challenge as well. So we'll just advance it. So what I'd like to just ask here is, you know, when we look at these challenges and we think about our topic today, which is our workforce, managing a changing demographic within our workforce, it was interesting. Why doesn't managing a changing demographic in our workforce hit the top 5? I was hoping that I would see a golden button there that I could bring to you guys, and I didn't see it. But then I got to think, or does it? Within each of those 5, I think there is a lot in there about diversity. I think there is a lot in there about workforce that's creating the challenges that hit those top five lists. So I just wanted you to reflect on that and think about that as we go into our exercise later in the morning about challenges, right? And say, you know, is this something that is impacting me, could impact it? And what is it within the workforce that creates an opportunity or a challenge relative to that? So we can just think about that as we move forward in the morning. Jackie, I'll just get you to move forward. What I want to do now, just before we hit the break, is I want to talk for 5 minutes, at the most 5 minutes, on what's the impact on your people programs and processes as a result of changing demographics. So we've got a changing workforce. So I want you to have a quick conversation at your table on how is that impacting your people programs and processes. So how is it impacting your policies and procedures? How is it impacting your performance management? How is it impacting training and development, career development, succession planning, comp, and recruitment and retention? We don't have a lot of time, but just generate some dialogue and feedback on that, and I'm going to check into you in a couple of minutes. So not a lot of time, but also things that you can think about as you go into your case study this afternoon. Not this afternoon, later this morning, after the break. So quick conversation right now. We'll check in, a couple of minutes at your table. Think about what is how is the changing demographic impacting those people programs? I'll give you a couple of minutes. Because we don't have a lot of time, I just want to start the conversation. And of course, as you work your case scenario after coffee, then you can continue the conversation. Because as you look at addressing your challenges, you need to be, with respect to your workforce, you need to be thinking about all your people programs and processes. And these are some of the key ones. But can I just ask you, what did you hear at your table with respect to policies and procedures and performance management? Did you get there?
I think you mentioned the disconnect between kind of having a more traditionalist leadership and then having most of the workforce being in that younger generation. Oh my gosh, yeah.
One thing with, we're being filmed here, right? So, but I think we do have to be candid and courageous in having conversations, because I'm sorry, it's Brenda. Yes, you're right. It's some of the traditions, and I'll say it. I'm getting up there, right? Like, you know, we just need to get somebody in that job, right, or in that position, and you know, we just need to move forward. Whereas the more younger people on our workforce will say, no, we can slow down. There's a different way to do this. Let's talk about it, right? So, right, that's the challenge then, right? So, how do we work that? And also, how do we do succession planning for some of those leaders who are the traditionals that do need to transition? It's time for them to go, right? But still honor the fact that they have a lot to offer our organizations, right? So how do we do that, right? How about this table? What did you guys talk about?
Well, I thought it was interesting what you said about a lot of your workforce are working 2 part-time jobs with a lot of hours still. So the flexibility that they're looking for is, would you speak a bit more on that, please?
Have courage.
Yes.
You can do it.
I have a lot of my staff is quite young, so they also want flexibility. So there's quite a few of them that work 2 30-hour-a-week jobs at the same time, and their focus is on training and development and professional development. They never ask about retirement funding. They rarely use their benefits that they have through work. They just want more training, and often for 4 to 6 weeks off of work at a time. So that's another thing that's a little bit different than I'm used to. It's not a case of, okay, well, you have 2 weeks in a week at Christmas holiday time. They will request time off and just say, well, just take it off my paycheck then. and it's an expectation that we will just then work around those requests. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, because I think that's the reality of many of our worlds, right? Like, they just expect that they can take 2 weeks off. They're entitled to 2 weeks vacation, so I can take 2 weeks off, right? And if I can't get it off, right? Yeah. Right, and yeah, and that you'll give that, and they'll take it without pay. They're completely cool with that, right? But yeah, and the thing is, if they are keepers, which I'm sure they are, we need to figure out a way to make that work for them, right? Perfect example. Thank you. What about here? What did you guys talk about?
Basically, we were talking about millennials as a whole. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed with millennials is you have to really keep them engaged. So you have to give them a lot of variety in their job. If they stay stagnant, they get bored, and then they end up going somewhere else. The other thing is as a non-for-profit, we really have to look at compensation and being creative with compensation. So we're looking at our benefits plan. We have dental and health and all that stuff that they pay into. But a lot of millennials say, well, I don't want dental. My teeth are really good, but I'd like to have a health spending where I could put it towards whatever I want to. So we have to become more creative with millennials.
So I'm quickly going to go through a couple of slides really, really fast here, and then we're going to take a break. Go advance. So what I want you to think about is, I found this quote when I was preparing about managing change, because really, I mean, so we've talked about trends, we've talked about, lots coming at us. So what is it then that we need to be doing to manage all of this, right? And I like this quote: like all good business strategies, workplace strategies evolve constantly, requiring ongoing monitoring and refinement. Be prepared to continuously grow your program, changing with your evolving workforce and emerging trends. So again, always being out there with respect to new ways of doing things. Things become static and old fast, right? Like, you used to leave programs in place for a couple of years. No. You could be looking at a program every 6 months or a year, right? So, challenge yourself that it doesn't, and it's not a bad thing to say, that doesn't work anymore. This just isn't working. That's, we used to invest in a lot in putting programs and processes in place, and so of course we wanted it to have the test of time, right? But it doesn't work anymore, and it's okay to say, that program worked a year ago, but it doesn't work anymore, right? And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Okay, I'll just get you to advance. Managing change, is there anything different? There is a whole course you can take on change management, right? So given the fact that there's so much change coming at us, and it's happening constantly, is there anything different that we need to be paying attention to with respect to change management processes? And I'm talking about the best practices with respect to change management. There's a process you need to go through when change hits your organization, right? So has anything changed there? And no, it hasn't. It hasn't. Effective management of change is a process. And it's a process that has, in my opinion, proven to be effective regardless of how often we have change. So, we used to implement change management processes when we were having a big cultural change in our organization, or, something huge has happened, right? Like the big wow, now we got to bring in the change management people, right? And help us through this change. That process that they would take you through for that change is similar to the change that we need to do, the process we need to go through, even as we have workforce changes, right? We just have to do it faster, right? You can't lock people away in a room. Like it used to be 10 years ago, I worked on a change management process, and we locked the war team away in a room, right? And they did their process, right? And then they came and they told everybody in the organization how it was going to work. Their process was good, but the problem was they locked a group away to do it. We need to take that process, that same process, and work it with our people every day. So do you get what I mean? It's a process, it's a good process, but make it relevant, right? So use the same steps, but engage your people. Don't lock a group of people away in a room to manage the change. Bring that process to your people and work it and make it relevant. So in my opinion, our managers, our leaders, our people need to know the process of change management, and they need to learn how to work it, and they need to work it every day within their organization. So a takeaway from this is teach your managers to manage change and help them as they work their issues every day. So don't keep it for a special event or whatever. Bring it to your people and teach them. I'll just advance real quick, and then we're going to take our break. Jackie, can I just... This is the last slide, okay. So employees want and need to be engaged when changes are happening. So again, make it very interactive. Teach your people how to manage change. Teach them the process. And remember that when change is happening, your people want information, right? Your millennials, who make up 50% of the workforce, want information. So engage them before, you engage them during, you engage them after, you give them detail, but you also give them the bigger picture. Lots of information is good for them, right? So communicate, communicate, communicate. And that's one of the things that we need to remember when we are developing our leaders and our managers. As I mentioned earlier, you need to teach them, and you need to make sure they are effective communicators, because that's critical and key when we're managing change. And make sure you're involving them in the transition. Again, that scenario where you lock people away to manage this change and then bring it to the organization, in my opinion, doesn't work. Their process is right, but you need to engage your whole organization, in my opinion, if you want to effectively manage change. Okay, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to work our scenarios. So a 10-minute break, so we should come back at 20. Is that okay, Jackie? 25-2? Yeah, 25-2 then. So thanks for getting back from coffee timely, because we're on a tight timeline, so thank you for that. We have had Syra and Nicole go away and, based on your feedback, put together 2 scenarios. Scenario A, this one, is organization A does not see the value in understanding the impact of changing demographics in the workplace. Leadership seems clueless to long-term potential issues this will cause. What can be done to help organization A see the value of changing trends to attract, retain, and motivate? That is case scenario A. And case scenario B is organization B believes that millennials and Gen Zs need to suffer or go through the trenches before they have earned the right to work on a project. Millennials and Gen Z believe they can lead a project without any background based on sheer confidence. What are the options, and how should organization B approach the situation? I want you to think for a minute, which scenario would you like to work on, A and B? But I want you to think, Nicole mentioned a good point to me at break, and it's about what if we don't have a lot of employees in our organization and we have all volunteers? And often we hear the comment, that just doesn't relate to us because we don't have employees, we've got volunteers. We need to change our thinking on that, right? We need to find our way. It's not okay just to say, I can't deal with that, we can't deal with it because we don't have the budget, we don't have the infrastructure. We are a volunteer organization versus an employee organization. We gotta find our way around that, because regardless, the trends that are affecting your workforce are affecting them whether or not they're employees or volunteers. So somehow we got to crack that paradigm, and we got to find our way. So this is an opportunity for you to work with your colleagues and do some brainstorming. And then I always think you can only do so much at a 3-hour workshop, right? Continue the dialogue when you get back to your workplace, right? That's the value of starting the discussion here and then continuing to work it and having the courage to do it, right? And to take the issues back then and continue to work them so you can find your way forward, right? And you can be ready. If you're not seeing the trend, it is coming. So again, we need to be forward thinking, right? So let's decide. We're going to have 2 groups. These 2 tables here, you're not going to be in these tables maybe, but these 2 tables will work on case B, and these 2 tables will deal with case A. You can decide whichever one you want to, but if you want to work on case B, you should move over here. And if you want to work on case A, you can work here. And if there's only one person that wants to work on either one of them, we'll work with you. So decide where you want to work, and then let's move. Okay, are we good? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 people here that would like to work scenario B. Syra, would you like to join this group? Sure. Thank you. And then we've got this group here, which is a bigger group, which is fine. But you know what? Come together as a group, right? And the same with over here. Come together as one group and position yourself so you can have good dialogue and discussion. Okay, so as you think through the scenarios, you're asked a question here, right? You're asked a question here, and you're asked a question over there. So you do want to focus on the question, but you also maybe want to focus on a bit of a process to get you to some potential solutions. So I thought as you work through your discussion, because we're going to give ourselves till, I think it's 11:30 to work on this, so you got some time. Think through these questions, because hopefully these questions will help you find your way with some potential solutions, right? And again, this is a brainstorming. There's no right or wrong answers. And what I want is good discussion in your group. Take notes, but take notes for yourself, right? This is helpful for you. We're not going to have a big report out at the end. I am going to ask you to do a little bit of a debrief at the end just on some learnings, whether that will be learnings on the process or what you actually talked about. You can decide what you want to share in a very quick wrap-up at the end. But this is about you connecting and taking the opportunity to speak with your colleagues about something that is challenging you, and so that you will have some thinking and some thoughts to take back to the workforce to start working the challenge. So again, own it, make it relevant for yourself, and provide good feedback that will hopefully also help others sitting at your table. Is everybody good about that? All right. Okay, so we're going to let you at it, and I'll check in, and we are going to do this again till I believe it's 11. You have till, I'm going to check in with you at about quarter after 11 just to see how you're doing. Okay? All right. Have fun. Good conversation. Okay, so if we can just regroup as a full group now. And so this group here, these two tables here, the situation was Organization A does not see the value in addressing the impact of changing demographics in the workplace. Leadership seems clueless to long-term potential issues this will cause and what can be done to help organizations to see the value of changing trends to attract, retain, and motivate. So is there somebody here willing to take the mic?
So what emerged in our discussion was the importance of pulling together some data because numbers talk to leadership. And so hopefully there would be some internal capacity to gather data and then present it in a meaningful way. We also talked about some of the challenges around where do you get the data and do you need funding to do that. So that's a whole nother topic. Also just building up dialogue, whether it's cultural differences or generational differences or gender differences, just getting to a place where you can sit your employees down and start to understand who they are as people and to see the value there. Educating leadership about the importance of serving the employees or you're going to lose them. Some ideas about gathering info internally would be to do surveys with your employees, maybe internal focus groups. And then just one idea that surfaced at the end of our discussion was the idea that you need to build some adaptive capacity. You won't thrive, you'll go off the cliff if you can't adapt in the future. So did I miss anything that's kind of key?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I love that I heard data in there and data relative to your people and saying, you know, it's not okay not to worry about that. It is a trend as we talked about. And also I heard good dialogue too in this group here is we don't have really a budget to do this, right? Maybe we don't even have employees, we've got volunteers, but we still need to address it. So we need to get our heads around that and a willingness to put that out to our leaders, to put that out to our employees and work together on solving some of those issues. So good job. Okay, so we've got organization, this table here, and organization B believes that millennials and Gen Zs need to suffer or go through the trenches before they have earned the right to work on a project. Millennials and Gen Z believe they can lead a project without any background based on sheer confidence. What are the options and how should organizations B approach the situation? Who would like to talk from this group? Great, thank you.
Well, some of the key things that we discussed in this would be communication and transparency. So one of the key things that is missing between these two groups is the communication, the transparency, the understanding why certain people are brought on projects versus not. And so we saw an opportunity. There has been some success within the group of when it has been done right and when people have accepted that, and that's when there was communication of, this person is junior, they're on the project team. You all might be thinking they're not, they don't have the background. You're right, but we're going to teach them. We're going to have this opportunity. So really giving them the chance to not only give the younger ones a chance to prove, to build a case, essentially. Why does this make sense? And see if it might make sense for that particular project, if it's mission critical or not mission critical. Another key point that we talked about was the culture and the mindset of the senior level managers of that, suffer through the trenches and earning, and that assumption that the experience required to be helpful for a project needs to have been earned in that organization. Not necessarily. There might have been previous experiences that would really contribute to this project, even if they weren't within that organization or directly related. So, a little bit of culture shifting there, because some of the managers may have suffered and gone through that previously. They expect the next generation to do that. And one of the key things that we thought of to help potentially resolve this would be the mentorship aspect of the two groups, as well as a co-leadership. If you were able to have conversations with the management and help them see the value of that next generation being having a chance to learn what the senior management knows and have that information dissemination, just make a policy or make it a habit to regularly have a senior and a junior co-leading the project at all times, or even just frequently. And then you have a better chance of allowing that information and getting rid of that stereotype of the young don't know what they're doing. Is there anything I missed?
No? We also discussed that.
Yep.
We also discussed that to build a culture in an organization needs a clearly defined mission statement, because millennials need to feel like they're working towards something all the time. So if you don't have those checks and balances in place where you have those crucial conversations and you say, so that they can end up leading up to or lead a project. So giving that employee the fair chance with tools and, creative ways of problem solving so that that employee has the best chance to succeed.
Thank you for those comments. Excellent, by the way. I just have to pick up on something like this. The one with the mission statement, it was interesting because we just moved offices lately, right? And so, our business manager was busy getting the place all set up, right? And I thought it looked pretty great. And our team came in for the opening, right? And after, a key member of my team, who's a millennial, said to me, "Great, the office group, but where's our mission statement? Where's our vision statement? Like, that's missing." And I'm going, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, that's what she wanted. She wanted to see that up on the wall. She said, that speaks to us, Janet. We need to have that posted, not just in our boardroom. We want that in the kitchen. We want that in the main work area. And I'm going, wow, I completely missed that, right? I just thought, well, we all know it, right? No, they want to see it. They live it every day. So that was an excellent point. The idea of the co-leadership, I think we need to think more about the co-leadership I worked with an organization and they asked me opinion on co-leadership. I gave them an opinion that later I went back to them and said, I'd like to talk to you about that again, because I went back to my team and talked about co-leadership. I again was working on an old paradigm. The old paradigm is co-leadership doesn't work. But you know what? In today's environment, co-leadership might work. So don't just throw it out. Yeah. Back in the day, though, we would never recommend co-leadership. Too many problems. Yeah, there's only one leader. Not necessarily. So just, I'm going, oh, co-leadership, oh, I don't know. You know, we didn't really explore it. And I went back to them and I said, let's have that conversation again, because that might work for your organization. So again, like, don't take the risk to explore new ideas, right? Just don't. And you know, you guys are dealing with leaders who are of my age and older, who, you know, might shut down an idea pretty quickly, right? So find a way to revisit it with them, right? And I think you've come up with some good ideas here to get them to listen and rethink it, right? And the other one that I heard here was, I had the pleasure of working with the McKinsey Group. I don't know if anybody knows the McKinsey Group, but honestly, it was a huge project. It was a project up in the oil sands, and they were actually developing infrastructure to be able to go into areas and service areas with organizations that have no infrastructure. So people was a part of that, right? And so I was brought in to work with them on it. And the very first, so of course I'm working with my client, of course they bring in their experts from their team to sit at this table. And then they bring in the McKinsey team. Do you know who was on the McKinsey team? Young guys and gals right out of school. I'm going, whoa, can you believe this? They are flying these people in from all over the place. What can they possibly bring to the table? They're right out of school. They were right out of school. They changed that dialogue up like you wouldn't believe it. And at the end of the day, I thought, I am so lucky to be part of this, because I am learning lots. And that's because I just had an opportunity to work with, you know, a generation who, yeah, they don't know a lot about the industry, what's happening in that company, but they have some really good ideas. And they are not afraid to bring them to the table. And that group were open to listening, right? So it was pretty powerful. So to your point there, not being afraid to, you know, bring those in and then see what happens and then see what's happening. And the courage to go with it, right? To take a bit of a risk, to say, okay, I think we better try this. Okay, hopefully the conversation you've had has been helpful. What I would like you to do now is in your handout, can you just advance it a little bit to the next one? I always think, as I've mentioned before, we leave with an action plan, right? Like we spent 3 hours here. Your organization has brought you here. They've said, go, come back to us with some good ideas. So let's spend some time and reflect. You know, what would I do differently as I return to the workplace? And fill out, I'd like you to spend 5 minutes and start thinking about your work plan. I also want to let you know that I've included in your handout a tool that our team has developed. It's a checklist, and you can do this checklist. You don't need a consultant to do it for you. You can do it. And so you can use this checklist to start thinking about some of your people, programs, and processes to develop a plan. So I just thought I would include that checklist in there. And if you want to talk to us about that checklist, please give us a call. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. But this is a tool that you can use yourselves. And a real commitment as we leave the room here to apply what we've learned and discussed today, right? And create that challenge and create that courage to take and further conversations through your organization based on what you've done or heard today. So I'll give you 5 minutes and then we're a wrap. So just 5 minutes to work on your work plans individually. Okay, I was wondering if we could just maybe just advance it to our Q&A and just think, you know, before we wrap here, is there something that you would really like to ask? Is there a question that, whew, you know, I'm going to have the courage just to put this out on the table? Is there a question? Yes. I'm going to give you the mic. Are you okay to take the mic? You're courageous to put it out and also put it through the mic.
Yeah, me in front of people has never been a problem. For succession planning, remember we were talking about that a little bit earlier and how touchy of an emotional topic it is for, I know we were having this discussion of managers don't want to talk about it because they're like, but I'm still here. Like, this is my job. I'm not going anywhere. So how do you have that conversation with them of, yes, we know you're not going anywhere, but you still need to have a backup for this, when the attitude might be, well, I'm going to start training this person and they're just going to leave. Why not just bring someone from externally and hire them and save ourselves a lot of time?
What I'm thinking about when she talks about succession planning and training, it's cheaper to invest in your current employees that you have than to have to recruit and hire new employees. It costs a lot of money to do that. So it's important to invest in your own employees if you got a little superstar millennial.
I think also depending on the role, if you don't recruit from within, you have the opportunity, or the risk, I should say, of losing a lot of institutional knowledge that is very valuable. And so that's one of the pros for, creating opportunities from within, because that institutional knowledge comes with. It doesn't always work. Succession planning doesn't always work, right? Like, it just doesn't. Sometimes you have to bring on a couple of different people to replace your jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades. Or Janet of all trades.
Thanks, Ira. Does anybody else want to comment? All excellent feedback, and hopefully that was helpful for you. I really believe, to Cyrus' point, right, it's amazing that, when we do succession planning, you do need to sometimes go through a number of recruits before you find the successor. You just do. And that's okay, because you learn every time you do it. I know it's expensive to invest, but the thing is, you also got to think, when you're succession planning, people don't stay with you for 5-10 years, right? So you know what? You have to still, for key and critical positions, you still have to do succession planning. So you may have those iterations, but in today's world, that's okay. And you're going to learn every time you do that training and development. I think, though, pardon?
She was asking a lot about the emotion of it.
Yeah. To that point, how do we get our leaders who really don't want to retire, they are not really planning on going anywhere, to start thinking about succession planning, because it's scary for them, right? So I think in terms of that, we need to help them understand that they need to have the courage to put it out on the table, right? To have the conversations, because eventually they will transition to whatever that looks like, to transition out to retire, transition out to come back in. Nothing stays the same, right? Our world, again, going back to talking to them about, our world is too complex not to change. They will transition to whatever that looks like. So to make sure that we're setting the organization up for success, we need to have people in the wings learning from them, right? And helping them understand that there are so many people in our organization, Gen Zs and our millennials, that are just wanting to learn. And it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
So I worked at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation for 14 years, and it's a heavily unionized organization. So when we first introduced the concept of succession planning, there was a lot of fear in the organization, because it felt like we were giving them a badge to say, okay, in 3 months you're no longer going to be here, and we're going to have transitioned all of your valuable information to this other person. And so the way that we approached it was that, obviously, you don't do succession planning for every role in your organization. You identify the key and critical roles. And so if you're having those same types of conversations, whether the person is been with the organization for 26 years or they've been in the organization for 2 years, you're really targeting your mission critical roles, the ones that are hard to fill, the ones that you don't necessarily have those skills on hand. So the way that we we took the approach is we were talking to people who had been in the organization and who were of a certain age, but we were also talking to younger people who were, let's say it was the head of our digital. We were still talking about succession planning, so we could help alleviate some of those concerns. What we were trying to do was build a runway so that if anything changed, whether they retired, whether they left us to go to a competitor, or whether they won the lotto and, went off to a private island, we had a runway so that we weren't left at risk. And I think that that really helped ease some of that emotion and bring down the temperature. Well, yeah, because, anything can change in an instant. I hate anyone could get hit by a big yellow bus because that's always a catastrophe. Like, that's terrible. Let's make it like they won $1 billion and they went and bought 17 islands, And just so you know, one person who was in a critical role did win the lotto. They won $18.5 million, so.
I'm going to disturb a little bit here because this is a critical conversation. And succession planning now, besides what both Janet and you have said, is going to become critical because of the impact of technology. And now that is going to touch to co-leadership, and it's going to touch on coaching, and on a skill that we really do not help our teammates to develop, and that is the art of the difficult conversation. I mean, you see a difficult conversation come, and I'm out of here as fast as possible. Now, I happen to teach conflict management at the U, but I still hate it, and it's easy to teach it. I'll continue teaching it as long as I don't have to apply any of it, right? But if you think about what's happening with automation, and if you think what's happening with artificial intelligence, if you're thinking about the displacement of skill sets and the need for the new skills, and we're not talking when Janet's forthcoming grandchild is going to be 25, we are talking in the next 5 years. If we're not having that conversation yesterday, the train, the bus, and the boat have all left, and we're not even going to be swimming. So everything that we talked about multi-generationally, the baby boomers can't go anywhere. I mean, the economic disruptions of the last 15 years have made sure of that. And while bodies may decay, the mind does not. And what the baby boomers have learned is that they are contributors. Co-leadership in terms of getting a Generation Z to coach me in social media, in artificial intelligence, in what automation means, that is the opportunity. So the emotion can be removed because you can use the leverage now of something that is completely outside of anything that I do every day. But how about it, Nicole, if Janet would show you how the 3D printer can help you now make your concept become reality faster, better, and cheaper. And now you've got me. Because every person in this room, by the time you're going to have kids, you're going to have 3D printers in your basement. And if you don't, you've just made your life that much more difficult. Kids. Kids. So that conversation should be happening around the kitchen table or the dinner table. I don't forecast. It is forecasted that dental labs will disappear by 2025. There won't be a need. You will have a 3D printer that, given the specs, will produce the implant that you will then take to your dentist to have it installed. Banking is already way ahead. There's a forecast that the tourism industry will be fully automated probably in the next 5 to 7 years. So if you want to begin to really be out there, it's going to help you with what you need to manage in-house. And you're going to be seeing more and more coming out around technology and what the impact of technology is going to be. And the not-for-profit sector is going to be at the front lines of that impact. So for those of you that have volunteers, I would encourage you to really look very critically who they are, because you probably have the skill sets that you need to help you manage internally in a better, different way. So I think that this was a fantastic segue, because it really brought together a whole bunch of things that Janet shared with us. But we're not talking about, Back to the Future anymore. We're talking about Back to the Future that is now the past. I'm just waiting for the replicator. That's the only thing that hasn't happened yet. And that's the only thing, literally, from that period that has not happened. And I want a replicator so I don't have to go to the coffee machine and get something. I just want to press a button and have a pill or something.
Well, I think that's a wrap. Thank you, Nicole, for providing that additional insight and furthering our thoughts as we leave. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed spending the morning with you. I learn lots whenever I come to these sessions that allow me to take thinking back to my workplace and also to the work that I do with our clients. And so thank you for that. Syra, thank you for joining us today and providing your things. And Jackie, thank you for organizing and helping us with the discussion today as well. So thank you for that.
Jackie.